The story opens with a couple who don't look ordinary at all. There's something unsettling in their eyes, something that clearly hints their intentions are far from pure. They're plotting to rob a small grocery store, and they've come prepared. As soon as they step inside, they start grabbing everything they can get their hands on. But greed rarely stops early. Their eyes soon fall on an old wooden box behind the cashier. The woman insists they open it, even as the terrified cashier warns them again and again that what's inside isn't what they think it is. Ignoring him, they give in to temptation and pry the box open, and instantly, a deafening gunshot rings out. The scene cuts to a desolate forest, where a frightened young woman named Samantha wanders alone. Her face is pale, her steps heavy. She looks exhausted, as if she's been lost for days without food or sleep. Surrounded by darkness and silence, she suddenly spots an old wooden cabin and rushes inside, desperate for shelter and maybe a bite to eat. Inside, she finds a backpack stuffed with food. Starving, she wastes no time digging in, but then she hears footsteps outside. Someone's coming. Heart pounding, she hides in a corner just as a man steps in, holding an axe. His face is hidden in the shadows. Without a word, he grabs the same bag she found and walks out. Samantha stays frozen, barely breathing. When the coast is clear, she decides to run, but just as she steps outside, she bumps into the same man. His name is Tom. At first, he doesn't seem dangerous. In fact, he offers her a hand instead of harm. Nervously, Samantha apologizes for taking his bag, explaining she hadn't eaten in 2 days. Tom admits he's stuck too. His car broke down 3 days ago, and he's been stranded ever since. Hearing that, Samantha panics even more. She insists they must find her husband, maybe he's returned from the gas station with help. With no better plan, Tom agrees, and they set off together. When they finally reach the station, it's empty. No one's there. They leave a note behind, hoping her husband might find it, then take some warm clothes and return to the cabin. As night falls, the forest grows colder and eerily quiet. Samantha shivers uncontrollably until Tom offers her a blanket from his car. Still confused, she wonders aloud why her husband left her like that. After a pause, she admits she's pregnant, and maybe that's why. Tom gently tells her to rest in his bed while he sleeps on the floor. Before sleeping, he brings her water from a nearby lake. But the next morning, when he goes back, the lake is gone, completely vanished. Both of them are shaken, but too tired to think. They try to rest. Later that night, Samantha wakes from a terrifying dream, gasping for breath. Tom is gone. She steps outside and finds a pale-haired girl lying unconscious nearby. Rushing to help, she brings her inside. Meanwhile, Tom is outside siphoning fuel from his broken car, trying to fix it. When the pale-haired girl wakes up, she locks eyes with Samantha, and her face twists with anger and fear. It's the same woman from the grocery store robbery. Samantha tries to explain everything that happened, but the girl doesn't believe her and storms out. Moments later, 2 gunshots echo through the forest. Tom drops the fuel can in shock and yells out, asking who's there, but there's no answer. Panicking, he runs back toward the cabin, unaware that something far darker is waiting in the woods. When Tom returned to the cabin, he was startled to see Samantha sitting with another girl, someone he'd never seen before. "Who's she?" he asked warily. The girl introduced herself as Jody and explained that she'd had a fight with her boyfriend, who left her stranded in the woods. She just wanted to get home. Tom listened, then agreed to let her stay, but only if she helped out with the chores. The next morning, while gathering supplies and sharing stories, Samantha and Jody began to grow closer, slowly building a fragile friendship. But Tom's unease kept growing. No matter which direction he walked, he always ended up back at the same cabin. Every path seemed to loop endlessly, trapping them in some strange circle. Disturbed, he told the girls, "Something's wrong with this place. We need to get out of here." None of them really knew where they were. Samantha swore her husband said they were in New Hampshire. Jody insisted it was South Dakota. Tom said he came from Los Angeles. The realization hit them, they were caught in something far beyond their understanding. Tom decided they'd leave at first light and walk as far as possible until they found someone, anyone. That night, both he and Jody had the same nightmare. Someone was injecting them with something, just like the one Samantha had described earlier, her own dream filled with unbearable pain. By morning, they packed up and began walking again. On the way, Samantha shared painful memories from her past, how her mother had died giving birth to her, and she'd grown up in an orphanage. As she spoke, she tripped over something buried beneath the dirt, dropping a bundle of cash from her pocket. Tom's eyes widened. "Where did you get all that money?" he demanded. Samantha hesitated, then admitted it was her savings, money her boyfriend had stolen before abandoning her. But when she looked down again, she noticed what had tripped her, a metal handle half buried in the ground. Tom used his axe to pry it open, and to their shock, it revealed an underground German bunker filled with wartime relics and old rations marked with Nazi symbols. Samantha, recalling that her father had fought in the war, recognized many of the items. They carried the supplies out, but somehow ended up right back at the same cabin, even though they'd walked straight. The forest seemed to twist reality itself. That night, trying to stay sane, they decided to have dinner together. The two women talked quietly as the fire crackled. Eventually, Jody opened up, admitting she was a thief. "I steal because I've got nothing else left," she said bitterly. Samantha smiled softly and asked if she could see the stolen money again, just once. "I've never seen that much cash in my life." Jody laughed and handed over the bag. But when Samantha looked at the bills, her laughter turned uneasy. "What's this? These notes say standard, they look like money from the future." Jody frowned. "What are you talking about? This is 2010. Samantha froze. "No, it's 1987. Confusion thickened in the air. They were from different timelines. When Tom returned, they bombarded him with questions. "What year are you from?" Tom hesitated. 2024, the three of them stared at each other, the truth dawning in silence. Somehow, they were all trapped in the same place, but from different years. Tom tried to rationalize it, but deep down he knew something impossible was happening. Then suddenly, a gunshot echoed through the forest. They rushed outside to find a man aiming a rifle straight at them, barking orders in German. Tom tried to plead for help, but the man shouted again, motioning for him to drop his axe. Tom obeyed. Within moments, all three were captured. But before they could even react, the soldier vanished into thin air. Shocked and terrified, they finally understood the horrible truth: they weren't just lost. They were caught in a fracture of time itself. Moments later, the same German soldier returned. Without a word, he untied Tom, dragged him outside, and beat him mercilessly before binding him to a tree. Then he stormed back into the cabin, demanding to know who the two women were and where they came from. His gaze suddenly fixed on the locket around Jody's neck. He froze. Something about it had caught his attention. Samantha, who understood German, quickly spoke up, saying the locket once belonged to her mother. The soldier's eyes widened in shock. Furious, he yanked a similar locket from his own neck. Inside was a photo of a woman who looked exactly like Samantha's mother. The air grew thick with confusion. Nothing was making sense anymore. The soldier forced both women outside at gunpoint. Samantha turned to Tom, still tied to the tree, and asked if he had a locket too. Tom shook his head. But the soldier didn't realize Tom had already loosened his ropes. Within seconds, Tom broke free and turned the tables. Now the German was the one tied and helpless. The three of them stood there, trying to piece together what was happening. Samantha insisted the woman in the soldier's photo was her mother, but Tom refused to believe it. Then Jody spoke quietly. "That woman, she's my grandmother." Tom's face went pale. Slowly, the truth started to surface: the German soldier wasn't a stranger. He was Samantha's father. But that wasn't the end of the mystery. When Samantha asked Jody for her date of birth, Jody replied, June 12th. Samantha froze. That was the day her mother had died giving birth to her. The horrifying realization hit: Jody wasn't just anyone. She was Samantha's daughter. Overwhelmed, Samantha broke down, realizing her husband had died in the war and that the child she lost was now standing before her, alive. Meanwhile, Tom revealed his own shocking truth. Sitting outside the cabin, he confessed to Jody, "My mother was a thief too." Jody refused to believe it, until Tom told her that his mother and her husband Kevin were the same couple who had robbed a grocery store years ago. In their greed, Tom's mother had turned on Kevin and killed him, a crime that led to her execution. The story shattered Jody completely. Without a word, she slipped out of the cabin, tears streaming down her face. Outside, Samantha sat quietly under the moonlight, her eyes meeting Jody's. For a long moment, they said nothing. The chaos, the fear, the time-bending madness, all faded. There was only the truth: a mother and daughter, torn apart by fate, finally finding each other again. Samantha wept as she realized she had lost her child at birth, but somehow, across time, she was given a second chance. But peace didn't last long. Jody tearfully admitted that her grandparents, the same ones who raised her, had been cruel and abusive. That's why she'd run away as a child. Hearing this, Samantha fainted. Tom rushed to help, but when she came to, she ran back into the cabin, desperate to explain everything to her father, the German soldier now tied to the chair. She begged him to listen, to understand the truth. But Tom stopped her. "Don't," he warned softly. "He's not the man you think he is. He's dangerous." Even then, Samantha truly believed her father would never harm her. But the moment he broke free, he grabbed his gun and clothes, ready to run. That's when the nightmare came flooding back, the one where she died giving birth to her child. Her husband, Adam, was away at war, and the ambulance had arrived too late. Tom, shaken, admitted that he too had a recurring dream, one where he shot his abusive father before turning the gun on himself. And then there was Jody, remembering the day she was hanged. In that instant, the truth was undeniable, all three of them had died before. But the strange part was, they knew how they had died, which meant maybe, they could change it. With that fragile hope, Tom led them back to the old German bunker, convinced everything had started the moment Hansman died. Stopping that event, he believed, was the only way to break the cycle. Samantha revealed that her father's death had happened in May, during an airstrike, and eerily, today was the same date, in the same place, Poland. It was their one chance to rewrite fate. The three, bound by time and tragedy, prepared for a final attempt to alter destiny. After thinking hard, Tom formed a plan. If Hansman didn't die, Samantha would never remarry. That meant Hansman would stay home, close enough to get her to the hospital during labor, perhaps saving her life. So Tom set out to find him. He found Hansman trying to repair a broken radio connection in a cabin. Samantha's voice trembled with urgency as she tried to make Hansman understand the danger, explaining the airstrike in painstaking detail, hoping he would pause and grasp the scale of what was happening, but he wouldn't listen. Ignoring her, he bolted, reckless and determined, forcing Tom to chase after him with every ounce of strength he had. In the chaos, disaster struck. Hansman's gun went off, a sharp, unforgiving crack splitting the air, and the bullet hit the couple square in the chest. Time seemed to freeze for a moment as Tom's world collapsed around him. He and Samantha rushed to the cabin with the injured pair, their hearts pounding and hands trembling, but Tom's mind was already racing ahead to the unimaginable consequences. If the couple died, the future itself would unravel, he might never even exist, and the weight of that thought almost crushed him. Overcome by a mix of desperation and rage, Tom lunged at Hansman again and again, but each attempt to seize him ended in frustration, Hansman slipping away like a shadow just beyond reach. Meanwhile, Samantha fought her own battle, tending to her daughter with frantic determination, acutely aware of a terrifying truth: no human was ever granted the power to witness their own past, for if they were, the temptation to alter fate would be irresistible, and the consequences could be catastrophic beyond imagination. Every heartbeat was a reminder of what was at stake, every second a knife edge between survival and total collapse, as Hansman continued to evade them, a relentless force of chaos that seemed almost impossible to contain. Tom's fear, guilt, and determination collided in a storm of emotions as he refused to give up, knowing that the fate of everyone he loved, and perhaps existence itself, hung on his ability to stop Hansman before it was too late. Then Tom began to notice a disturbing pattern. Hansman kept circling back, returning relentlessly to the same cabin, as if some unseen force was pulling him there. Sensing an opportunity and driven by a mixture of fear and determination, Tom followed, heart hammering, adrenaline coursing through his veins, and at last, the two men were face to face. Hansman unleashed a barrage of bullets, the air splitting with each deafening crack, but miraculously, none found Tom. It was as if reality itself was bending around him. With every shallow breath the couple took in their final moments, Tom's very existence began to erode, slipping slowly from the fabric of time. And then, in a terrifying instant, he vanished entirely, erased from existence, a ghost born of tragedy, all because the couple had perished. Samantha, watching helplessly, felt a storm of rage and heartbreak surge through her. Anger at her father consumed her, knowing he had recklessly endangered not just her life, but the future of countless generations, entwining guilt and despair into a suffocating weight. Amid the chaos and destruction, Hansman finally saw the devastating consequences of his actions, the truth crashing down on him with brutal clarity after years of secrets, pain, and thoughtless decisions, but by then, it was far too late to undo the damage. Overhead, Russian planes appeared like dark specters in the sky, their engines screaming, bombs beginning to cascade toward the earth in a relentless, thunderous barrage. Explosions ripped through the landscape, sending shockwaves of dust and fire, and in the middle of it all, Samantha was struck, collapsing to the ground in agony. Her father, driven by desperation and paternal instinct, dragged her toward a nearby bunker, shielding her from the worst of the devastation, even as the world seemed to fracture around them. In that moment, every heartbeat was a jagged reminder of loss, every breath a collision of fear and hopelessness, and time itself seemed to tremble, bending under the immense weight of mistakes, mortality, and the merciless forces of war. Samantha's body was weakening, her breath turning shallow as her existence began to dissolve, like a shadow fading at sunrise. Every memory, every emotion, every scar that had defined her was slipping away. Yet in her final moments, one truth echoed louder than the chaos around her: Hansman had survived. He had done the unthinkable, escaped death and changed the past. The man who once doomed them all had found a way to cheat fate, and in doing so, he had rewritten the timeline. The story shifted once again, bending and twisting through time until it returned to where everything had first begun, the small, unremarkable grocery store that had once set a chain of tragedies in motion. But this time, the air was different. The world felt healed. The store looked brighter, cleaner, alive with the quiet hum of ordinary life. And walking through its aisles was Jody, only she was no longer the frightened, desperate girl she once was. She moved with grace and confidence, dressed in a tailored outfit, her hair tied back neatly. She was refined now, educated, successful, a woman who had finally escaped the shadow of her cursed bloodline. As Jody approached the counter to pay for her groceries, she caught sight of a familiar face outside the window. Kevin. The same Kevin who had once manipulated her, drawn her into his reckless world. But now, the scene was different. He wasn't with her. He was laughing beside another woman, someone new. Jody froze for a moment, her eyes filled with disbelief. This was the exact moment when, in the old timeline, everything had gone wrong. The theft. The chase. The violence. The birth of a tragedy that would ripple through generations. But this time, Kevin's new girlfriend was the one standing at his side. And that changed everything. Because Kevin and Jody had never crossed paths, Tom, their son, had never been born. The ripple of time had erased him completely. But strangely, that realization didn't bring sadness, it brought peace. Because Tom's very existence was born from pain, from broken choices and grief. Now, with Samantha still alive somewhere in this new world, the cycle of loss had been broken. The scene then cut to a quiet cemetery, sunlight filtering through the trees. Samantha stood there, alive and calm, holding a silver urn, the ashes of her father, Hansman. Her expression was unreadable, part sorrow, part forgiveness. She knelt by a small gravestone and gently placed the urn down, whispering something only the wind could hear. Maybe it was a goodbye. Maybe it was the end of guilt. Either way, she was finally at peace. Moments later, the camera drifted back to the grocery store. Life went on as usual, customers talking, cash registers ringing, but behind the counter, a faint tension hung in the air. Kevin's new girlfriend, Amelia, stood near the shelves, her fingers twitching nervously. Her eyes wandered toward a locked metal box kept behind the cashier's counter, a box most people ignored. But something about it drew her in, almost like it was calling her. "Open it," she said softly to Kevin, who glanced at her, confused. "Why?" he asked. "I don't know," she whispered. "I just need to see what's inside." The cashier frowned, warning her to stay away. But Amelia's curiosity only grew stronger. The camera slowly zoomed in on the box, aged, rusted at the corners, humming faintly as though it held a heartbeat of its own. And as her hand reached toward it, the faint echo of a familiar sound rippled through the air, something between a heartbeat and a whisper. It was the past, still alive inside that box. The last remnant of a story time itself had tried, and failed, to bury. As Amelia's trembling fingers hovered over the old metal box, the cashier's voice cut sharply through the tense silence. "Don't open that," he warned, his tone low but urgent. "If you go inside, nothing will ever be the same again. You won't be able to fix it." His eyes held the kind of fear that came from knowing something the rest of the world had long forgotten. But Amelia didn't listen. Something, whether curiosity, destiny, or madness, pulled her forward. Her hand gripped the box's handle, and before anyone could stop her, the lock snapped open with a chilling click. The room went still. A single, echoing gunshot shattered the silence. The screen went black. And just like that, the story ended.